My name is Elena. I'm 36 years old and live with my husband Marcus in a small town just outside Seattle. We've been married for 8 years. That evening, I spent hours preparing an anniversary dinner, just like we've done every year since our first. I put on the ivory dress Marcus once said was elegant and alluring, lit scented candles around the living room and cooked his favorite French-style beef stew. The table was set perfectly. Folded napkins, sparkling crystal glasses, red wine chilling, everything was ready. Except for the man I call my husband. The clock struck 8, then 9. I texted once. No reply. Called twice. Voicemail. I told myself maybe he was stuck in traffic, maybe a sudden meeting came up, but a voice inside me whispered, "No, it's not that." At 10:04 p.m., the front door opened. Marcus walked in, coat slung over one shoulder, hair windswept. He didn't look at me, didn't flinch at the sight of nearly melted candles and cold food, just muttered, "Long day." I stood behind the kitchen counter, gripping a dish towel. "Do you know what today is?" I asked, my voice trembling from restraint. He looked up, confused. "Friday. Why?" "Wedding anniversary," I whispered. 8 years. Marcus froze for a second, then shrugged and gave a weak smile. "Didn't notice. You know how busy I've been lately." I glanced at his shirt, a faint pink stain on the collar. Definitely not wine, and not my lipstick. A chill crept up my spine. I stared at him. "What's that on your collar?" He brushed it off casually, probably makeup powder from a female colleague. Meeting room was packed today. I said nothing more, just walked to the table, blew out the candles and cleared the dishes, each motion slow and numb. In my mind, tiny clues began to link together. Late nights with vague client meetings. Phone always face down. Abrupt calls ending the moment I entered the room. The next morning, while he showered, his phone buzzed. On the screen, Sienna, sent, new photo. My heart pounded. I didn't open the message, but I'd already seen enough. That name had never come up in his stories. But there it was, blazing on the screen like a slap across the face. That evening he said he'd be home late again. I didn't ask. I simply nodded. But this time, I stood by the window and watched his SUV head toward downtown instead of home. I knew then, love cannot survive when only one person holds on. And some betrayals don't need confession. Silence is enough to shatter someone. I stayed silent for a week after discovering the message from Sienna. I needed time to watch, to confirm whether what I sensed was real or just the jealousy Marcus always accused me of. Then I saw them. In the Target parking lot. She wore a tight burgundy dress, blonde curls bouncing as she leaned close to Marcus, who smiled and opened the car door for her. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my palms began to sweat. This wasn't a secret affair. They weren't hiding. They laughed openly in broad daylight as if the world belonged to them. That night, I waited. "Where were you?" I asked calmly, like I was asking about the weather. "Lunch with a client," he replied, loosening his tie without meeting my eyes. I nodded. "A client in a burgundy dress with wavy blonde hair?" He froze, then glanced at me. His surprise flashed, then vanished into a strained smile. "Did you go through my phone?" "No need. I saw it with my own eyes." He sighed, now clearly annoyed. "Elena, you're overreacting. She's a new coworker. I'm just helping her settle in. You always jump to conclusions. Don't ruin everything over some imaginary scenario." I leaned back in my chair and gave a quiet laugh. Then why haven't I heard of her before? And since when does helping a coworker mean standing that close? "Because you blow things out of proportion, like right now," he suddenly snapped. "No one can breathe around your oversensitivity, Elena." I didn't respond, not because I had nothing to say, but because I was swallowing my fury. Like I always had. Days later, I got an invitation to a family dinner hosted by my mother-in-law. It was a monthly tradition, full of food and chatter. I didn't want to go, but Marcus said something that stopped me cold. "It might be good for you to meet Sienna, she'll be there." I blinked. "What?" "She's Brendan's close friend, my cousin. He's bringing her along, so don't make a scene." Wanted to cry. I looked at Marcus, trying to find even a flicker of truth in his eyes. But all I saw was a man arranging another woman's presents like I didn't exist, just another name on the guest list. That evening, I wore a plain black dress. No makeup, no forced smiles. When I walked into the dining room, Sienna was already there, pouring wine for my father-in-law, smiling like the beloved future daughter-in-law. Marcus stood beside her, his hand hovering near her back, close enough to sting. My mother-in-law looked at me, then at Sienna, and said softly, "Elena, I don't think you've met Sienna, she's very close to the family." The words pierced me. No one seemed surprised. No one thought it was wrong. That's when I realized. This wasn't just betrayal from Marcus, it was silent complicity from everyone. I sat down, poured myself a glass of wine and watched Sienna giggle with Marcus's cousin. I always thought betrayal crept in through shadows. But no, it was happening under bright lights, through laughter and applause. And I was the only one who felt out of place. After that night, there was no doubt left. Marcus and Sienna weren't hiding. Their connection wasn't subtle. It was a blade slowly slicing through what little trust I had left. But I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I withdrew, like someone finally waking from a dream they'd convinced themselves was real. I started writing. Every morning after Marcus left, I sat at the kitchen nook with cold coffee and jotted down notes in the leather-bound journal I once used for recipes. Now, it became a log. Marcus's comings and goings, odd transactions on our bank statements, midnight calls, suspicious bills in my name I'd never signed. I wasn't being paranoid. I was an accountant, and I trust numbers. I began reviewing old bank records. Over the past 8 months, Marcus had transferred more than $60,000 from our joint account, with no clear notes. Secondary mortgage loans had been opened under my name, with my signature, but I hadn't stepped into a bank in ages. I remember sitting frozen for nearly 2 hours, staring at a copy of a loan agreement from Falcon Capital Bank. It listed $250,000, marked as strategic investment capital in a renewable energy firm. The guarantor, Elena D. Marshall. Me. But the signature was forged. The strokes were stiff, unlike my usual fluid signature. I called the bank. The representative confirmed the documents had been submitted from our home address. The file included a copy of my ID, pay stubs, and marriage certificates. Everything matched. I hung up and sank into the chair, my heart pounding like it might explode. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had used my identity as a tool to funnel money into reckless investments, and I would be the one left to bear the consequences if everything collapsed. I called Lydia, my best friend from college, now a financial crime attorney. She went silent as I told her everything. "Elena, if what you're saying is true, Marcus has violated federal law. This isn't just forged signatures, it's identity fraud with intent to commit financial deception." I nodded, though inside I felt hollow. "I need evidence, don't I?" "Yes, and you're already doing the right thing. Keep logging everything. Receipts, screenshots, photos of the documents you find. Every tiny detail could be a crucial piece." From that day forward, I lived as two people. By day I was still Elena, the quiet wife beside Marcus, smiling at neighbors, making dinner, asking how was your day. But at night, I was someone else. A woman waking up, piecing together the proof of a betrayal that broke more than just a heart, it broke the law. One night, Marcus left his laptop open. I knew I shouldn't invade his privacy, but I also knew that if I didn't act, I'd lose everything. I opened a folder labeled Consulting Docs, and my heart nearly stopped. File after file had my name, 6-figure numbers, forged documents, and a clear profit loss sheet. All losses. He had burned through all the money tied to my name. I printed everything out and hid the documents in an old wardrobe that belonged to my mother. I didn't cry, there were no tears left. What remained was one crystal clear thought. I had to protect myself, no one else would. The next morning, Marcus kissed my forehead before leaving for work. I looked at him, cold inside. He had no idea that in just a few days, everything would come to light. And this time, I wouldn't drown in silence. I met with Jordan at her law office on a gray Monday afternoon in late March. She sat upright, hair in a tight ponytail, eyes sharp as freshly honed steel. Jordan had been Lydia's classmate in law school, and when Lydia realized she had a conflict of interest, she introduced Jordan with just one sentence. "She doesn't lose." Jordan flipped through the file I handed her. Logs, bank statements, loan documents, and the forged files Marcus had stored. She examined every page, missing nothing. Finally, she looked up and tapped her finger on the desk. "We're not filing for divorce," she said. "We're filing for annulment. If Marcus married you with intent to defraud you financially from the start, this was never a valid marriage." I held my breath. "Annulment? But we've been married for almost 6 years. Time doesn't matter as much as intent. If we can prove he planned to use your identity for financial gain from the beginning, then legally this marriage was built on fraud. It never existed, at least not in the eyes of the law." That statement lit something inside me, not anger but release. I didn't have to carry the shame of a failed marriage. I could erase it like a botched draft and start over. From that day on, Jordan and I worked nonstop. We gathered testimony from an old co-worker of Marcus's, someone who recalled him joking, "Marrying an accountant is the cheapest way to borrow interest-free money." We subpoenaed the bank for security footage and transaction logs, including a clip of Marcus walking in with another man to submit loan paperwork using my name. Jordan was meticulous. She didn't just want to win, she wanted this case to send a message. Women are no longer pawns in someone else's financial game. On the day of the hearing, I didn't step out of the old gray car Marcus used to mock as Grandma's ride. I stepped out of a sleek black limousine, the door opening like a scene from a well-directed film. I wore an ivory suit, hair swept up, heels striking confidently on the marble floor of Fulton County Courthouse. Marcus stood at a distance, wearing a wrinkled suit, his face draining of color when he saw me. Sienna stood beside him, red dress, red lipstick, a stiff smile caught between pride and fear. I walked past them without a glance. In the courtroom, Jordan presented our case to the judge. She detailed every calculated action, forged paperwork, misuse of assets under my name, the manipulation of trust to fabricate a marriage built on lies. The judge, a woman in her 60s with piercing eyes, listened without interruption. When Jordan finished, she turned to Marcus. "Do you have a response?" Marcus stood, lips tight. I just wanted to invest for our future." "And does that future include your girlfriend sitting at family dinners like a member of the household?" Jordan interrupted, holding up a photo taken at my home. Sienna sitting next to Marcus, her hand on his thigh like she owned the place. No one spoke. The judge nodded slowly. "I'll issue my decision within 7 days. But my personal comment to Mrs. Marshall. You're not only brave, you're brilliant." I left the courtroom with steady steps. Behind me, Marcus said nothing. And I didn't look back. That life ended the moment I stepped out of that limousine. From now on, I would write the story myself. The courtroom had been packed. Relatives, old friends, even strangers who'd heard whispers of the case. But I paid no attention to their eyes. I walked in tall, focused, and placed the folder in front of the judge. Marcus sat across from me. Next to him, Cynthia. Today stripped of her usual confidence, a muted dress, lifeless hair. No wave, no smile, just a hollow stare. Judge Loretta James, stern renowned for fairness, struck her gavel. "We are here to hear the petition for annulment filed by Mrs. Elena Marshall on the grounds that the marriage was founded on fraud and serious deception." Marcus stood immediately, voice trembling. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. We've been married 6 years. There were real feelings. She's just mad I have a new girlfriend." Jordan rose without missing a beat, voice cold and firm. "We have evidence that Mr. Marcus Marshall forged my client's signature for 3 separate bank loans totaling $240,000. He exploited the legal institution of marriage for personal financial manipulation and is now living openly with Miss Cynthia Tate, who is also implicated in questionable financial activity." She displayed each photo, each statement, the forged signatures beside my real ones, so stark even a first-year law student could see the difference. Judge Loretta nodded, reviewing the files we'd submitted days earlier. "This court has also received an audio recording of Mr. Marcus telling a friend, and I quote, 'Just marry the girl for a few years and you can borrow under her name without collateral.' Cynthia began to breathe heavily. She turned to Marcus, whispering sharply, words I could guess. You told me this was handled. I said nothing. I observed like someone watching a movie in which she'd once played the victim, but no longer. Marcus leaned forward. Elena, you know I didn't mean to. I did it for us. I invested so we could have a better life. I met his eyes, unwavering. You invested for both of us. Then why am I the one stuck with the debt? And why is the woman you took on vacations, bought watches for, and rented luxury apartments with, Cynthia, not your legal wife? Behind me, a few murmurs stirred. Cynthia flushed but kept her composure. The judge tapped her gavel again. Order in the court. Jordan continued. We are not only requesting annulment, but also recommending criminal investigation into the financial fraud and document forgery committed by Mr. Marshall. Marcus's lawyer scrambled to respond, stammering without substance. The evidence was overwhelming. Judge Loretta reviewed the files once more, then gave a quiet, decisive nod. Based on the records, testimony, and evidence provided, the court finds sufficient grounds to provisionally approve Mrs. Elena Marshall's petition for annulment. The matter concerning financial fraud will be referred to the appropriate investigative agency for further legal action. Marcus collapsed into his chair, burying his head in his hands. Cynthia shot to her feet, grabbed her purse, and rushed out of the courtroom like someone fleeing a lost battle. I remained seated, still and quiet, as if, for the first time in years, I no longer had to hold myself together. Judge Loretta looked at me and gave a subtle nod. Mrs. Marshall, I hope you understand. This isn't just a legal victory. It's a reaffirmation that a woman can stand up, protect herself, and overturn a game rigged to make her fall. 3 weeks after the hearing, I received the official notice from the Williamson County Superior Court. Annulment granted. All legal ties between Mrs. Elena Marshall and Mr. Marcus Marshall are hereby terminated, immediately. I read every word slowly, as if lifting a weight from my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just stood there in my new apartment near Lake Travis, letting the late afternoon light pass through the window and gently touch my face. Freedom. After 6 years bound by false promises and a marriage that only looked good from the outside. The news about Marcus didn't stop at the courthouse. A local newspaper ran a bold front-page headline. Former executive accused of forgery, marriage fraud to seize wife's assets. A number of investors began pulling their funds from his company. People who once praised him now turned away, refusing to speak his name as if it were something unclean. As for Cynthia, she quietly left town the week before after being terminated from the client relations department of a prestigious law firm. There were rumors that a client had filed a formal complaint accusing her of leaking confidential information to assist Marcus in backdoor deals. I didn't bother verifying it. It didn't matter to me anymore. I was free. Not just on paper, but in my mind and heart. No more sleepless nights over cryptic messages. No more feeling like a stranger in my own home. No more pretending everything was fine just to please others. I spent the next week clearing out the past. I packed up wedding gifts, the framed photo from Santa Fe, even the shirt Marcus gave me on our first anniversary trip. Then brought them all to a thrift store near the Pennybacker Bridge. The store owner asked if I was sure. I nodded, feeling weightless. I'm not throwing away memories. I'm making space for better ones. Oh, Jordan, my attorney, stopped by one evening with a bottle of cold-pressed juice and some crispy waffles. I have to say, she laughed. I've never seen anyone dress for an annulment like they were going to the Met Gala. But it worked. Marcus looked ghost pale the second you walked in. It wasn't to rattle him, I said. It was to remind myself. I'm no longer playing defense. In a quiet moment, I thought back on everything I had been through. The confusion, the shame, the awakening. I wasn't seeking revenge. I just wanted to reclaim control, self-respect, and the right to live a life that reflected my worth. One Saturday afternoon, I drove to visit my mom. She lived alone in a small wooden house in Round Rock, and had been texting me often with concern since the trial. She opened the door and hugged me tight. You've lost a little weight, she said, but your eyes, they've changed. I don't see that silent suffering in them anymore. I smiled. Because I'm not living to endure anymore, Mom. I'm living to choose. Over dinner, she told me about a new art class in town, Why don't you sign up? You used to love drawing. I remembered how much I did, but for the past 6 years I hadn't drawn anything except Marcus's budget plans. That night, lying in bed, I opened a blank sketchbook and drew the skyline I saw from my apartment balcony. The first lines were stiff but slowly softened. Each stroke felt like a deep breath. I wasn't being controlled anymore. I wasn't living under anyone's shadow. I left my old apartment on a late autumn morning, the breeze from Lake Travis rustling the crimson maple leaves at my feet. They danced around me as I walked, like a quiet farewell to a closing chapter. I didn't take much, just a few suitcases, a box of colored pencils, and my old sketchbook. All I needed now was space, to breathe, to heal, and to bloom. I moved into a small studio apartment on Austin's east side. No lake view, no granite countertops, no voice-activated speakers, but it was mine. Every pillow was hand-picked, every painting on the wall was one I made. For the first time in years, I lived in a space that reflected me, not someone else's image of who I should be. I changed my appearance as a goodbye to the woman who once stood quietly behind a cheating man. I cut my long hair short and dyed it a warm caramel, soft but resolute. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself, but in my eyes, something familiar returned. Vitality. I returned to therapy. The same therapist I had seen briefly after my miscarriage 3 years ago still remembered my name. This time, I wasn't there because I was grieving. I was there to understand why I had allowed myself to endure for so long. Each week, I spent an hour unraveling emotional knots. I learned how to set boundaries. I learned not to apologize for protecting myself. Gradually, small things began to matter again. Morning walks in Zilker Park, watching dogs play and elderly couples hold hands. Sitting in my favorite cafe, sipping cinnamon-topped lattes, and reading a few pages without anyone telling me I should be doing something productive. I started taking small illustration commissions, book covers for indie authors, wall murals for children's playrooms. Each finished piece filled a part of me. It wasn't about needing someone to complete me anymore. It was about being whole on my own. At a local art show, an 8-year-old girl stood in front of my painting of a wildflower field at sunset for a long time. "Were you sad when you painted this?" she asked. "It looks beautiful but kind of sad." I knelt and smiled. "A little. But sometimes sad can be beautiful too, right?" She nodded and gently touched the frame as if she could feel the emotion inside. In that moment, I knew I had truly come back. Not as the old Elena, but a stronger, deeper version of her. I started opening up to new relationships, but this time I put myself first. No more shrinking to please. No more silence to keep peace. I learned to say no without guilt. One night, while cleaning my bookshelf, I found a small wooden box. The one where I had once kept Marcus's handwritten letters. I opened it, read a few lines, then carefully folded them back and carried the box downstairs. I dropped it into the recycling bin as gently as if placing a quiet farewell. I didn't need to keep lies, no matter how pretty they looked. I don't know where life will take me next, but this time, I'm holding the wheel. No one else is steering. No more living in a gilded cage labeled good wife or silent supporter. I used to think that exposing the truth, winning in court, and watching the betrayer fall would erase all the pain, but when the courtroom doors closed behind me, I realized something more painful than betrayal. I was the one who let myself suffer for so long because I didn't believe I deserved better. Cynthia left town right after the trial. Marcus was suspended indefinitely and now faces serious financial charges. All the things that once propped him up, his title, the polished silver watch on his wrist, were now the remnants of a man who had grown too used to manipulating others and forgotten how to live with decency. But I didn't care anymore. Not because I forgave him, but because I no longer needed rage as my compass. Healing isn't linear. It's a series of days where I stared at my reflection, wondering if I was strong enough to keep going. Nights I couldn't sleep, not from sadness, but from a mind buzzing with unfinished dreams and new beginnings. Moments when I stood in a grocery aisle holding 2 boxes of cereal and cried, not because of the cereal, but because it was the first time I chose something for myself without asking anyone. I had clung to that relationship like a life raft, terrified I'd drown if I let go. But the truth was, I'd been swimming all along. I just didn't trust my own strength. One June afternoon, with sunlight filtering through sheer curtains, I sat in my studio, finishing a large painting of a woman standing with outstretched arms in a wildflower field. No harsh outlines, no gloomy tones, just the sky, the breeze, and eyes full of peace. I signed the corner, Elena M., and felt something bloom in my chest. I submitted the piece to an art contest in Santa Fe without expecting anything. A month later, I received an email. I had won an award. Not first place and not the biggest display, but it was the first time I'd been recognized simply for being me, not someone's wife, not someone's shadow. I didn't tell many people. I just printed the letter and taped it behind my closet door, where every morning I'm reminded that I'm starting over, from a place of pride. I'm no longer afraid of being alone. I've learned to enjoy candlelit dinners by myself without feeling lost. Every weekend, I buy myself a bouquet of tulips. The way people once said, love someone brightly, and I choose to love myself, brightly and gently. One day during therapy, Dr. Green asked, if you could go back, what would you do differently? I paused for a moment, then smiled. I wouldn't try to save something that had no life left. I'd learn to let go sooner. My story isn't about revenge. It doesn't end with Marcus or Cynthia's downfall. It's about a woman learning not to let betrayal define her worth. I was once a wife, a lover, someone who's hurt, but now I live with dignity, freedom, and a heart no longer afraid. Because when you stop clinging to someone just because of the past, you finally begin to live, not to prove anything to anyone, but simply to be yourself, fully and deservedly. Elena's story is a powerful reminder that self-worth isn't found in how we're loved by others, but in how we love and respect ourselves. Betrayal hurts, but staying in pain or stepping forward to begin again is our choice. Elena had the courage to face the truth, reclaim her voice, and rebuild from the ruins. In a world full of uncertainty, sometimes the bravest thing we can do isn't to forgive others, but to forgive ourselves. For once, accepting far too little. What do you think about Elena's journey? Would you have done the same in her shoes? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, powerful stories about family and life. Genesis, there's a man in the hallway. He's been standing in front of no turning back for a while. I think you should know.